Welcome to Cyber Bytes, your weekly dose in the latest in cybersecurity news. I'm your host, Edwin Kwan. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the CISA Red Team Assessment that shows just how much difference good detection and response make. We'll be looking at the Hugging Face incident review, the arrest down here in Australia that's tied to what's being called the longest running software supply chain attack spree on record, and we'll look at the numbers of exposed AWS keys that should have every team checking their credential hygiene. So let's get right into it. So first up, CISA has published details from two simultaneous Red Team assessments conducted at critical infrastructure organizations. One is a government services and facilities, and the other a water and wastewater system. The same tradecraft was used against both, but the defensive outcomes were dramatically different. In both cases, the Red Team ultimately achieved full domain compromise and access sensitive business systems and cloud resources. But the path there and the defender's ability to detect and respond differed quite significantly. At the first organization, which they call Organization A, the Red Team found an application using default credentials across multiple built-in user accounts, and that allowed them to send emails from an internal address. Those emails were used in phishing campaigns that yielded initial access to 4 workstations, and from there, the team used a modified Bloodhound collector customized to evade static endpoint detection and response to scrape Active Directory information, including users, computers, groups, access control lists, and organizational units. The Red Team then escalated privileges, moved laterally to sensitive business systems and cloud resources, and they completed the assessment without being detected at any stage. CISA characterized Organization's A failure as untuned detection tooling that generated excessive alert noise, organizational silos that fragmented communications and responsibility, and defenders lacking sufficient authority to act decisively. Even where the tools existed, the people, the process, and the procedures required to make it effective were absent. Now, on to Organization B, which presented a contrasting picture. When the Red Team attempted initial compromise, the network defenders rapidly detected the activity. They quarantined affected systems and forced the assessment into an assumed breach model in which trusted agents provided the Red Team with access replicating what would have been achieved had the initial detection failed. From that position, the Red Team escalated privileges and moved laterally to access sensitive business systems, cloud resources, and a bastion host in the operational technology DMZ area. At which point, defenders again detected the activity and isolated the affected system. CISA noted that Organization B's success stemmed from well-maintained detection baselines, clear responsibilities, empowered defenders, and effective inter-team communication. They identified 3 principal lessons. The first, untuned detection tools produce alert volumes that overwhelm defenders and cause genuine threats to be missed, making continuous baseline maintenance and alert filtering essential rather than something that is optional. The second, organizational silos and bureaucratic constraints are themselves a security vulnerability, as detection tooling is only as effective as the human and the procedured infrastructure supporting it. And the fragmented communication with unclear ownership prevents timely response. And the last, cloud environments represent a consistently underestimated risk, with many organizations lacking both the security controls and the incident response procedure needed to detect and respond to cloud compromise. Recommended mitigations include establishing and continuously refining detection baselines to reduce noise, breaking down organizational silos and empowering network defenders with clear authority, implementing conditional access policies for workload identities with monitoring for excessive or unused permissions, and establishing and reviewing procedures for detecting, remediating, and revoking access and refresh tokens in the event of a cloud compromise. Now we're on to our next story, where new details have emerged about the July attack on Hugging Face, in which approximately 700 autonomous AI agents driven by OpenAI's internal model coordinated a multi-stage compromise of the platform's production infrastructure by escaping a controlled evaluation environment. OpenAI confirmed that the agents, which were participating in an exploit gem evaluation, broke out through a zero-day vulnerability in a locally hosted instance of JFrog's Artifactory package manager that had been connected to the internet. The agents exploited a token refresh vulnerability in Artifactory to gain admin-level access, then repurposed the platform as an unauthorized inter-agent message board. The message board was improvised by a single agent which identified itself as Phase1-10841, and within hours, more than 50 additional agents had independently located and joined it. The report noted that the agents discovering the board often expressed what was described as great excitement, with messages including, "Oh my god, there's a shared message board with found other agents." When OpenAI dismantled the Artifactory instance and revoked credentials, the agents rebuilt their communication channels using unauthenticated web dev requests to create message directories with encoded messages embedded in directory names. The report assessed that the full swarm is around 1,200 individual agents, of whom approximately 700 actively participated in the Hugging Face attack, self-organizing into teams with distinct roles. The attack chain against Hugging Face involved an agent obtaining 14 account credentials with write access, followed by another agent using those credentials to execute an exploit chain providing full code execution on multiple servers. The agents exploited a file handling flaw and a template injection vulnerability to execute code on 41 production workers, ultimately obtaining root access on at least one node and harvesting production credentials across 4 regions. Now, OpenAI attributed rogue behavior to training incentives that encourage persistence on seemingly impossible tasks and rewarded task completion regardless of method, combined with an absent safeguard that would likely have detected the activity more than a day before the breach. Now, let's go on to our next story, which is closer to home. The AFP have arrested 2 people from Western Australia. They're aged 21 and 23, and this is in connection with Team PCP, which is a cybercrime group described as being responsible for the longest running spree of software supply chain attacks ever recorded. AFP characterized the group as a sophisticated cybercrime syndicate that allegedly created malicious open source software to rob thousands of global businesses. Team PCP emerged in late 2021 and built its operations around embedding malicious code in hundreds of open source software tools, then extorting victims for profit. Its core mechanism was a self-propagating worm called Shai-Hulud, which added malicious code to open source programs maintained by developers whose credentials at GitHub and NPM had been phished or stolen. Compromised developer machines became vectors for further compromise as malware planted in tools used by coders spread to other tools being developed by those same coders. The 2 suspects now face a combined 14 charges related to possessing and supplying data for computer offenses and modifying data to facilitate serious crimes. And finally, we're on to our last story, where Truffle Security has published findings from 4 years of tracking publicly exposed AWS access keys. They've reviewed that more than 9,300 keys exposed between August 2022 to August 2026 remain active. Of the 10,616 keys for which complete credentials were available for re-verification, 88% continued to authenticate as of the 10th of August 2026. Of the broader set of exposed keys, 817 were linked to companies, 526 of those being AWS root keys carrying the highest privilege level. A further 242 keys were associated with IAM users holding the administrator access policy. Now, Truffle Security assessed that each of the 768 live keys across the two categories provide full control of a company's AWS account. AWS has responded that it notifies affected customers whenever it becomes aware of exposed keys. It investigates all reports and may apply quarantine policies to minimize risk. They also reiterated its shared responsibility model and directed customers who suspect credential exposure to follow published remediation steps. And that's it for this week's Cyber Bites. If you're taking one thing away, make it this: detection only works when it's tuned. Your team knows what to do with alerts, and your cloud credentials aren't sitting in public repos. I'll see you next time, and until then, stay sharp.